because we need to help the people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And all I can say is go on a hypoglycemic diet, stay on your medication, whatever you're doing, stay on your medication, go on a hypoglycemic diet, which is a natural diet. Be aware of allergies, because all hypoglycemic people have allergies, so that is connected with one another. You have to sort of experiment with the diet yourself, because we are all unique. We have a biochemical individuality, so we're all different. What is good for one is not good for another. And that is why you need probably the help of a nutritional therapist. But in the beginning, you can just adopt the hypoglycemic diet and then see how you go, stay on the medication, and once you start feeling better, start lowering your medication very gradually under the supervision of a doctor. Get the help of a doctor. If you can educate your doctor, that would be marvelous, because he should be able to understand it. And because it is important to overcome PTSD, because PTSD is now classed as an incurable disease. There are very few people that are cured of PTSD.
And that totally gets to change, because that's not true.
And that is the same with depression. PTSD is like depression, exactly the same, except there is a traumatic event connected to the depression that is mentally.
And that's the same thing with me, Yuri. And I was told that chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, multiple chemical sensitivities, I was diagnosed with ADD as well. I was told all of those things were incurable.
Yeah, that's right.
And that you would need medication probably for the rest of your life. Didn't they tell you that?
Right. That's right. Now we have to stop this. We have to stop this. We can't allow people to suffer for years. Like I have suffered for years. I've suffered from when I was 25 until I was, I think, 39. That's many, many years that I was suffering because of the ignorance of the profession. You know, the ignorance of the profession. I looked up to them as God, you know.
Yeah. Well, I have people that I work with who are in that field, who are therapists, who are medical doctors, nurses, pharmacists. They all come to me, and they're all extremely sick. I see a lot of the chronic fatigue, the depression, the anxiety, etc., things I mentioned earlier. And many of them have tried the drug route, are on drugs. They don't like how they feel. They didn't like the effects that the drugs were making them feel. So by the time they come to me, they're ready to surrender to nutrition. They understand that biochemistry is not going to come back overnight. That is a very slow, meticulous process, because it took them years to get sick. So it's not going to, you're not going to find a silver bullet.
Yeah, it's not a pill.
Overnight. No. But what Urian was saying earlier is absolutely right. When you return to a traditional foods diet, to what he likes to call the hypoglycemic diet, which is essentially an ancestral diet, because you're eating what is known as 3 square meals a day. You know, our ancestors before World War II knew to sit down.
Hold on, just a second. Now, I'm going to ask you guys I was actually going to ask him anyway, so I'm glad you went there, Pam. Thank you guys so much. When you say 3 square meals, Americans today, and I know a lot of individuals around the world, don't eat square meals. They don't even know what square meals. So can you describe a square meal?
Right. Well, we were known as the land of 3 squares prior to World War II. So we would have sat down and gladly and fearlessly eaten meat and potato style lunch and dinner, and bacon and egg style breakfast. We didn't have bacon phobia back then. We didn't have egg phobia back then. We didn't have liver phobia.
I can hear all the bacon lovers cheering about what you're saying now.
Yes, absolutely. So we ate those foods back, prior to World War II. And back then, we were actually much healthier back then, both mentally and physically, than we are today, because we knew to eat animal fat in our diet. We knew that these foods were good for us. And so but it's good to know that these foods are fine to eat, that we can get over our fear of these foods. But we must eat consistently throughout the day. So it's great that some people want to return to ancestral foods, but it's not going to cut it just to eat them once a day. You have to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's why we have the words breakfast, lunch, and dinner in our vocabulary. So if you look at the way we ate, before World War II, we sat down at 7 o'clock in the morning, approximately, and sat down and had a bacon and egg style breakfast, a meat and potato style lunch at noon, and likewise at dinner. Homemade meals, They weren't made with preservatives. They didn't come from the middle aisles of a grocery store. They were whole foods. And the bulk of the calories, about 70% of the calories, would have been coming from animal fat. So that was the secret. That's what's missing from today. And when we fell into the low-fat lie back in around the 1970s is when it became the most pervasive. It was in the 1980s when people started collapsing with depression and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. You can look back in the history and you can see that correlation taking place. That is certainly what happened to me. I fell into the low-fat lie in the 70s, and by the 80s is when I collapsed.
You know, I get to mention for a lot of you guys that shop and you're looking for the whole foods, you really deserve to look organically. Everything, I'm going to say it's almost like everything seems to be modified in some way, or it's covered in pesticides or other chemicals and toxins. Go organic. And when I say organic and whole foods, you know, the free-range animals, they're not living on that GMO food, the genetically modified foods, the vegetables that have been, treated and changed. You want to hit the organic whole foods. What was that, Urian?
Yeah, we have found that if you are tested for hypoglycemia, there is a special test for this, but if you are hypoglycemic, 3 meals a day is not sufficient. You need to eat about every 3 hours.
That's right.
Yeah,
you're right.
Some have to eat every 2.5 hours. And that is because, now let me explain what hypoglycemia means. Hypoglycemia came about because we have been consuming too much sugar in our Western world. Sugar is a poison. Now, we need sugar, but for the manufacture of energy. But if you eat too much sugar, the glucose in our system causes the creation of peroxide, start to attack the DNA, and so the body sets up a defense mechanism against excess sugar consumption in the form of insulin resistance. Now, insulin resistance in the end will turn out to be diabetes type 1, but it takes about 20 to 30 years, and sometimes shorter, for the hypoglycemia, which is pre-diabetic insulin resistant, to develop into diabetes. But what I want to say about that is why hypoglycemic people have to eat every 2 hours or 2.5 hours or 3 hours, because when they eat, they produce in the initial stage too much insulin. And when you produce too much insulin, you get a crash in your blood sugar level. So therefore, you have to even out your blood sugar level by eating every 2 or 3 hours instead of 3 meals a day. And the most important meal of the day is your breakfast.
Amen.
Yeah, breakfast is the most important day, a high-protein breakfast. And I'll just, my doctor, the nutritional doctor said, oh, you have to eat chicken, So my clients ate chicken. They got an allergy towards chicken. They couldn't eat chicken. So you have to vary your breakfast. But I always eat eggs. My eggs is good for me,
Yeah.
And eggs, the people say, oh, you can't eat eggs because they produce too much cholesterol. Nonsense.
That's absolute nonsense, Urian. You're absolutely right.
Because your cholesterol is produced in your liver. Your liver if you don't eat cholesterol, your liver will produce more cholesterol than is necessary. And people don't realize that. So, and that is the same with animal fat. That is why animal fat doesn't make you fat. It doesn't cause you high cholesterol.
Exactly.
Because it is your liver that controls your cholesterol level.
Yeah, I have books on my books page that describe exactly what Urian's saying. One of the books is called The Cholesterol Myths. Another one is called Why We Get Fat. So these are books that I would highly recommend that people read if they believe that animal fat and cholesterol did indeed join the dark side.
And I'm going to actually challenge folks to go beyond that. I know a lot of you think, okay, well, of course she's saying that. This is her book. No. You guys, look at those, and then I challenge you to find more. Try and find as much information. You guys hear me say it. I've said it before. I've typed it on the page. I've taught it when I'm speaking. You want to know something? Don't leave it up to someone else to teach you. Go and find out about what you're dealing with. Do your research.
Yeah, I have a page, but it's called Research Evidence for Hypoglycemia. But it's not me talking, it's all about research. And I would suggest to people that they look up the page Research Evidence for Hypoglycemia. Can Google search it and it will get there. And there are a lot of information. Nothing that I say, but that is everything that is said by scientists. You know, so there's a lot of information there that come from scientists, not from me. You know.
And I'm going to tell you, folks, you're going to end up coming back to their books, because not only I've actually taken a look. You guys, I cheated. I actually looked at some of your things, but you're going to end up coming back to their books because they're easier to read. There's a lot of medical, I'm going to call it medical mumble jumble, because, you know, doctors don't like to speak human speak. They like to make wonderful, large, long words that, you know, you can put in a spelling bee and possibly lose to some 5-year-old. But you want to go and read these books. And I challenge you again to go and do your research. But I'm telling you, you're going to end up coming back to these books, so save yourself the time as well, and go ahead and get these books. I want
to say something about digestion. Urian kind of touched on it earlier. Is when people return to their traditional foods diet, sometimes they have trouble digesting, the animal fat and protein, because essentially the digestive system forgets how to break these foods down. I spend a lot of time, I spend several months helping people revive not just their adrenal glands. I'm not just looking at blood sugar control. I'm also looking at digestion. And within digestion, there's 2 things I think people need to be aware of that is crucial in terms of restoring the biochemistry. And that is that as people get sick, their gut moves towards a more alkaline pH. I'm not saying it becomes alkaline. I'm just saying it moves towards a more alkaline pH.
Okay, can you translate that alkaline? That way people know what you're talking about.
An alkaline pH? Well, the gut is supposed to be, the stomach is supposed to be as acidic as battery acid. That's how acidic it's supposed to be. So when you're eating protein, for example, you need to have the acidity of the stomach where it's supposed to be, so that you can break those the protein down into those wonderful components called amino acids, and that they can go on to actually feed different parts of the body, including the brain. And so if the stomach isn't acidic enough, that breakdown, decomposition of the protein is going to be compromised. So what I have to do with my clients is I have to get them to cheat and start eating foods that actually retrain the gut to be acidic. And that means they must eat things like raw sauerkraut, pickles, kefir, real kefir, not the fake kefir you might find in the store that's loaded with sugar, and yogurt, same thing, not the fake yogurt that you see in the grocery stores, but real yogurt. And these are foods that help to push the acidity of the stomach and the gut in its entirety back to where it should be.
Back into balance.
Those are very important foods to include in your diet on a daily basis. Sipping on lemon water can also be very helpful. But why we need to make sure that the stomach contents are acidic is because as the stomach contents come out of the stomach, then it's chime, and that's got to be acidic enough to actually release the bile from the gallbladder. And bile is what's going to help break down those wonderful animal fats and help to stabilize your adrenal glands, for example. So if you're not producing bile, well, then you're going to run into trouble in terms of digesting the fat. And that starts by making sure the stomach contents are acidic enough, but you also may need something like ox bile. You may need to sip on some apple cider vinegar before each meal as well. All of these things help in terms of helping to acidify the gut, stomach, and to thin the bile and release the bile. So make sure your digestion you're working on your digestion as you're introducing these wonderful ancestral foods back in your diet.
Exactly.
I just want to support Pam here, because I have had clients that were schizophrenic, and they can't produce acids in the stomach. You know, they have a low acid content in the stomach, and so that she's absolutely right what she's saying. You need that stomach acid to work. You know.
Oh, and even some people take hydrochloric acid. It's a supplement.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Urian.
Go on.
You were saying you recommend the betaine hydrochloric acid, and I do too from time to time as well. It really helps.
For schizophrenic, I found that schizophrenic, we tested them with a lithium paper, and they didn't produce the acids in the stomach. Hydrochloric acid. I have an article on hydrochloric acid somewhere on I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere on the internet, so you can read on it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a very common problem, and I always say Mother Nature played a very bad trick on us by not giving us enough symptoms in our gut. Unfortunately, people can have a lot of digestive problems, and they can go years and years and years and ignore the red flags. People have gas, have bloating, don't have really good evacuations and so on. So they end up getting more and more septic year after year after year because they're not really listening to their bodies. And that's because we're just so detached from that wisdom. And unfortunately, it's because a lot of what we're doing, because we're so septic. And these heavy, you touched on heavy metals earlier. That's another thing I focus on. Because without proper bile production, of course, heavy metals are going to get backed up in the body because one of the exit routes for the heavy metals is going to be through your bile. So, and heavy metals play a huge, huge burden on the brain and your hormones and so on, just because they get so backed up in the body. And it'll alter somebody's personality big time. So you've got to get everything back in sync, and digestion plays a huge, huge role in terms of eliminating all these things that are going to interfere with your mood.
People are trained to not listen to their body anymore.
We mustn't forget the roughage, roughage to shave off the microvilli in the stomach, in the gut. So we need roughage too to balance things out. Without roughage, we are not cleaning our gut.
Actually, that's where I have to respectfully disagree, because I'm a recovering vegetarian and I ate a lot of roughage and it wrecked my gut. Our guts are actually designed for animal fat and animal protein and relatively small amounts of roughage. So some roughage is fine, but please don't overdo it, because
Well, in nutrition, you don't overdo anything.
Yeah, balance is key.
That's because of our USDA and Health Canada telling us to eat 5 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables and 6 to 11 servings of carbs. That's a lot of roughage. That's way too much roughage.
But actually, you know what? Before we even go any further, I'm just going to actually put it this way. Even without following the USDA or out following those things, listen to your body. We'll start there, and then it's the body has its own balance that we get to follow. Was that something that both of you guys would agree on?
Yeah. And you must also agree that we're all individual biochemistry. We're all different. For instance, people suggest to eat this and to eat that, and that is all right for some people.
Yeah.
I feel people should experiment with what they eat and see how they go, and then gradually adopt that diet.
I caution people on the roughage simply because people don't understand bile. And why people get backed up today isn't because of a lack of roughage in the diet. It's because they're not producing enough bile. And you need to have good bowel movements. You have to have bile production optimized. In other words, you should be producing about 1/2 liter to 1 liter of bile a day. And you need bile in order to stimulate peristalsis, which helps obviously with elimination. And
okay, hold on a second. Again, because we have, and by the way, just so you guys know, we don't just have adults that listen to this show. There's also children. So if there's a term that would not be something that they would hear in school at a younger age, if you could just simplify it and make it so everybody could hear it. Say the word, please, because I don't believe in hiding words.
No. Peristalsis is a big word, and what it means is it helps to carry the bowel movement, it helps carry the stool, what you're going to be evacuating throughout the entire intestinal tract. And so I was a big believer in lots of roughage. I have a book on my website called Fiber Menace, and I really recommend people read it, because I was a big believer in a lot of roughage in my diet. And I realized after doing this research that I had been fooled, because our guts are not designed to break down cellulose. and I didn't know about bile production. You see, bile is what's crucial for elimination to take place. And when I'm working with people and we start boosting bile production, that's when we start to see bowel movements improving. I don't use the roughage route simply because I know that it's going to be because of the bile and lack of bile in the intestinal tract.
You know,
and
I'm going to add also right
like
there.
Ox bile, for example, to help you, or do coffee enemas, things like that, to help boost bile production. Then you'll see what I'm talking about.
You know, I'm going to add right there, there's also an issue of the fact that many folks are not drinking enough water. I actually know individuals, I actually have a client that has only at max, not at least, but at maximum, a glass of water a day.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's terrible.
But we have to consider the water that's in the food as well. We have a kidney specialist here where I live in London, Ontario, and he discovered through his research that people who drank too much water had terrible kidney function.
Mm-hmm.
So the National Institutes of Health, they're the people who published the study that said that we should be drinking 8-ounce glasses of water, or they alluded to consuming 64 ounces of water a day. What happened was the bottled water industry took that research and said that we should be drinking 8-ounce glasses of water a day, and that was to promote the sale of the bottled water industry.
But what about those individuals that are living off of greasy foods? Like, we have a lot of individuals in the South that, and also living off meals ready to eat, MREs, they're living off fried foods, that are living off, I mean, things, nothing is fresh. Everything is fried in heavy lard, tallow, grease. I've even heard bear fat.
That's good.
So
those are all good fats. The thing about the water, just to finish up, is to make sure that, and you can find that this high water consumption myth comes from the bottled water industry. You can track that down online. But essentially what I'm saying is what this nephrologist and others have concluded is that we probably should be drinking about 4 glasses of water a day. That's the average adult. If you're outside working in the sun, sweating more, whatever the case may be, that's going to vary from one person to the other. But the only reason why I qualify that is because I don't want people drinking too much water, because that will tax the kidneys and that will lead to potential mineral imbalances. So we have to be very careful with this advice over drinking water too.
Again, folks, remember, this is for educational information purposes only. Please speak to your doctor. If you're living in a southern environment where it's hot, where you have high humidity and heat,
but
keep that in mind, that you need to have water into your body, because you are losing a lot of that water.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Another danger about dieting is that we are controlled by our brain instead of our body. You see, in order to digest food, the first thing you have to have saliva. If you don't enjoy your food, you don't have the saliva to digest your food. You must enjoy your food to start off with, and then experiment in that area what you enjoy. Don't start force-feeding yourself things because you think it is good for you, A lot of people do this, and that is a danger about dieting, I find.
You know what? It's interesting. I'm going to go back because, Pam, you mentioned something, that I'm really going to, talking about 3 square meals and how we have to have bile. You know what? And the yogurt's getting our body producing that again. I'm going to actually add this. Another reason individuals are having such a big issue, and I've told this to people before, is the yo-yo dieting. Keeping our body out of balance, and then our body tries to put us back in balance. We're creating an issue on top of another issue.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. That's the danger of dieting business, And so you have to go by what do you enjoy eating. When you eat something new, take a little bit until you like it, and then you can eat more of it. But don't force feed yourself things that you really don't enjoy eating, because in the end, your body will tell you what you should eat anyway.
Yeah,
and there's a fabulous resource. And some of these nutritional seminars are free online. One of them is by Sally Fallon from the Weston A. Price Foundation. There are several hours of her nutritional seminars that you can find on YouTube, and I highly recommend that people sit down and listen to Sally, and she can talk about the work of Dr. Weston A. Price, who authored the book Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. Now, this book should have been called Nutrition and Physical and Mental Degeneration. because when he studied primitive cultures, not only did he notice that they had radiant physical health, he also noticed that they had radiant mental health. So this mental degeneration that we've been seeing go on over the last 50 to 100 years here in North America, this is very new. All of these labels that we're hearing about today are very new to humans.
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to talking about labels, take us back to PTSD. When you are, folks, my area is PTSD, and these two can tell you, how diet and how much this, this whole series, today is all about, the senses, and today we're focusing on what's coming in our mouths. The things you put in your body affect you not just physically, it's also affecting your mental state, your emotional, expression, and how you're processing things that are coming into you. It's really important to watch what's going into your body, because it really affects everything, especially PTSD. And you guys, we're coming to the end of this segment. Pam, Yurian, you guys are grounded. You're making it way too interesting. You guys, it's perfect because you guys deserve to know everything that is out there for you. And I encourage you to continue listening. To know more, again, I tell you, you can go to the PTSD retreat. You can on Facebook. You can go to the web page where it's the ptsdretreat.org or ptsdretreat.org. Go to pamkilleen.com. And also naturalsociety.com, and there's all these wonderful places that you can go and get information. You can also get peer-reviewed articles and books, all sorts of different things, and I challenge you to get in the know, especially if you are struggling with PTSD or you are a loved one dealing with an individual with PTSD, because if you have someone in your home dealing with PTSD, more than likely you are also dealing with your own symptoms of secondary PTSD, and we'll get into that on another segment. Pam, Yurian, this is going to be something that I get that we're going to get to do many times over, and I'm actually going to...
Before you wrap up, I just want to announce I'm going to be doing a talk on January 17th.
Yes.
Online, that's free, and it's the role of copper and dental health. Now
you're also talking zinc, too.
I do another talk on copper and mental health, but this is on copper and dental health, and if you go to pamkilleen.com, upcoming events, you'll see that there's a link, and you can register for the seminar for free.
And folks, not just that one. She also has other webinars and things that she puts out there, and there's also plenty of articles that you can get from her page, and also Jurian has a lot of articles and publications that you can actually look up and get for yourself. I've actually put both the links on the PTSD retreat page for Jurian and also Pam's as well.
Yeah, people can also Skype me. My Skype name is Jur Plesman, Jurplesman. So you can always Skype me between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock Australian time.
That would be 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
No, 1 p.m., 5 p.m. Australian time. I don't know what time.
Yurian, I'm actually giving the U.S. time right now. It's 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. U.S. Standard on the East Coast. If you're in the West Coast.
That's good. Yes, they can Skype me and I can help them out with whatever, because I do also psychotherapy.
Yeah. So I'm going to close this out because we're down to the last couple seconds here. Folks, thank you so much for listening. This is Nicole Johnson-Starr, Pam Killeen, and Jurian Plesman. And thank you for listening to the PTSD Retreat Radio Talk Show. Have a good night.
Thank you.